This drawing is by a girl who first ran at age 4 and has run away 110 times.
In June 1993, American alt-rock band Soul Asylum released their hit single Runaway Train to both critical and commercial success. The song itself is melancholic, yet catchy, but what really stuck with people over the years was the music video, which received heavy broadcast on both MTV and VH1. The video opens with the text, "There are over 1 million youths lost on the streets of America," followed by a drawing made by a runaway, depicting her father. This is how she viewed him. The song then begins, with acoustic guitars and Dave Pirner's world-weary voice playing over reenactments of broken homes. And then, that infamous chorus arrives. The video footage abruptly ends, and is replaced with still images. Images of young, missing people, each face accompanied by a name and the year they disappeared. An official upload of the song on YouTube currently has over 200 million views, though this is but one incarnation of the video. Since Soul Asylum agreed to recut the MV whenever one of the youths was found, several updated versions exist. The UK had its own version too, as did Australia, Canada, and Germany. The goal of the music video was simple: to help raise awareness about each of the runaways' stories, and hopefully bring them back home. But as would come to light in the subsequent decades, many of them hadn't gone missing of their own accord, and some met with terrible fates that don't bear thinking about. Today, 30 years on since Runaway Train was released as a single, we'll be exploring what happened to those featured in its music video, going over the fates of those who were tracked down, and the question marks surrounding those who weren't. Since so many versions of the music video exist, and since so few of them are available to watch online, this is likely far from a comprehensive list of all of the people featured, but I'll get through as many as I can. The holiday season can be a stressful time, especially for business owners. It means more mailing, more shipping, and if you don't prepare early, more stress. But that's where today's sponsor, Stamps.com, comes in. For the past 25 years, Stamps has helped over 1 million businesses like yours save on the big three: time, money, and stress. They're essentially your personal, 24-hour online post office that lets you print your own postage and shipping labels in seconds from wherever you do business. No lines, no traffic, no waiting. All you need is a computer and a printer. They even send you a free scale, so you'll have everything you need to get started. From the dashboard on the Stamps.com mobile app, you can easily schedule package pickups, and if you sell products online, their service seamlessly connects with every major marketplace and shopping cart. Running low on necessities? Order shipping and mailing supplies, labels, and even printers from the supply store. The thing I love most about Stamps.com has to be their premium carrier discounts. We're talking up to 84% off USPS and UPS rates, which really helps your bottom line. Plus, they automatically tell you your cheapest and fastest shipping options. Thanks to Stamps, I've saved a bundle. Get your business ready for the holiday rush today. Sign up at stamps.com/lazymasquerade for a special offer that includes a 4-week free trial, plus free postage and a free digital scale. Again, that's stamps.com/lazymasquerade, or click my link in the description below. We'll start with a name that some Reddit users may be familiar with: Christopher Kurz. This 17-year-old vanished from Eagan, Minnesota in April of 1990. On the day he went missing, Christopher had told his parents that he felt too sick to attend school, and so stayed at home alone while they went to work. When his mum Alona returned at around 3 p.m, she discovered that both Christopher and her 1988 Blue Dodge Caravan were nowhere to be found. In the kitchen, a note, presumably written by her son, was found resting on a table. It read, "Mum, something important came up, plus feeling somewhat better. Back by 6, unless I get lost. Love, Chris." Strangely, the word lost had been underlined twice. The family's pet dog, Bowser, who tended to be leashed up during the day, had somehow gotten loose. Worryingly, Chris had also taken his dad's shotgun with him, minus the ammunition. Chris's father, Jim, drove throughout the night, searching for his missing son, but sadly, to no avail. To begin with, Christopher was considered a runaway, and his disappearance didn't garner much media attention. The city of Egan dealt with a fair number of such cases, so it was hardly hot news. "It wouldn't be unusual for us to have 2 or 3 runaway missing person cases in a weekend," said local detective Stephanie Bulks. "I mean, we have regulars that take off every Thursday or Friday, and then they're back after a long weekend." But Chris simply wasn't that kind of kid. He didn't associate with any bad eggs either, and wasn't involved in any illicit activities. He was an excellent student, who, by all accounts, had a happy home life and plenty of hobbies and friends. And yet, he had seemingly run away. The following day, Chris's family received a letter, postmarked Duluth, Minnesota. It was supposedly from Chris. It stated that he had lied about being ill, and that he had gone somewhere remote to end his existence. To corroborate that, the family's Dodge Caravan was found abandoned by the side of the road just 2 days later, in Itasca County, northern Minnesota. Christopher himself was nowhere to be found. 1 week after he had vanished, Christopher's parents, neighbors, and friends began receiving a bizarre series of phone calls from a still unidentified person. All they could hear on the other end of the line was a large amount of indiscernible noise, as if a party was going on in the background. And each time they asked who was on the other end of the line, the caller would hang up without saying a word. These calls continued for 6 months, before ending abruptly. It wasn't until Chris was featured in Soul Asylum's music video that his case started to grab the wider public's attention. In 2004, the investigators received another anonymous letter, this time from Seattle, in which the writer said that they should stop looking for Chris and that he'd return home when he was ready. It's believed that this letter was nothing more than a cruel hoax. "My pipe dream is that Christopher works for a little company in Cleveland," said Chris's father, Jim. "He's married and has 3 kids. He's not a backroom employee, but a very quiet employee. Smart, could do the job, hold the place together, be very relied on. I know that the reality, intellectually, is probably a lot different, but you have to have some way to hope." The whereabouts and well-being of Christopher Kurz remain unknown. His parents are still in the house where they lived in 1990, and have kept the same phone number in case he ever chooses to contact them. If alive, Chris would be 50 years old today. 13-year-old Andrea Durham went missing from Fort Walton Beach, Florida on February 1st, 1990. That evening, she was with her mother and elder sister at their Royal Apartments residence. Her mum and sister left to run an errand and asked Andrea to stay home and vacuum. Andrea agreed. They returned 2 hours later and found the apartment door unlocked. The vacuum cleaner was standing upright in the middle of the living room, but Andrea herself was nowhere to be found. Her purse, clothes, and all of her other personal belongings were undisturbed inside. Even her shoes were still by the door. It was as if she had been interrupted by someone whilst in the middle of cleaning. Andrea wasn't the type of girl to go out by herself in the middle of the night. Even though she hadn't taken any of her possessions, or even any money, the authorities initially considered Andrea a runaway, though they later conceded that something more sinister had likely happened to her. The 3 main theories now being that she was either targeted by a random killer, taken by a person that she knew, or that she had fallen victim to human traffickers. The fact there was no sign of a forced entry has led many internet detectives to go with the middle option. But despite interviewing nearly everyone who knew her, the investigators working the case were never able to identify any potential suspects. As well as the Soul Asylum music video, Andrea's face was added to cold case playing cards and distributed to inmates throughout the US, in hopes that someone would recognize her or connect a few dots and come forward with information. People in prison talk. Maybe someone had heard something. Sadly, this didn't result in any breakthroughs. Some have theorized that Andrea's disappearance may have been connected to 2 murders. Mark Reeb, and William Alex Wells III, two half-brothers who operated in Santa Rosa around the time that she vanished. No hard evidence has ever linked them to her case. March 18th, 1991. 2-year-old Tommy Dean Gibson was last seen playing in the front yard of his family's rural residence in Azalea, Oregon. That was at 11:30 a.m. At the time of Tommy's disappearance, his father, Larry Gibson, was working as a Douglas County deputy sheriff. Larry went for a jog around the family property in the late morning, carrying a handgun to shoot stray cats that had set up camp close to the household. According to Larry, while out on his jog, he fired a shot at a cat, but missed the animal. He then continued jogging, returning home around 45 minutes later. It was then that he discovered his son was missing. The family reached out to law enforcement later that day to initiate a search of the property. Larry was advised not to report to work at the sheriff's office, but apparently dressed in his uniform and left the family property for about 25 minutes during the investigation. Larry claimed that his 4-year-old daughter had witnessed an unidentified couple arriving in their driveway and taking Thomas. He told investigators that he was checking a local rest stop for signs of Thomas or the couple. While members of the local community helped to search for Thomas, Larry himself remained at home, and at one point even suggested that the searchers give up and go home due to approaching bad weather. A dead feline was later found on the family property, near where Thomas was last seen playing. Investigators believed that Larry's shot had actually struck the stray cat after all, but that the bullet passed through the cat and hit Thomas on the other side, ending his life instantly. They theorized that Larry had buried his son in an attempt to conceal what had happened. Larry consistently denied killing his son and maintained his innocence throughout the investigation. Following Tommy's disappearance, Larry resigned from the sheriff's office and relocated with his family to Montana. In 1994, he and his wife separated, with her taking their 3 other children back to Oregon. Larry's daughter, Karen, later altered her account of the incident, which led to her father being charged in connection with Tommy's case. According to Karen, who was 4 at the time of the incident, she hadn't witnessed 2 strangers come and steal Tommy, but instead had seen Larry striking him repeatedly that morning, and then placing him in a black plastic garbage bag, which he loaded into the rear of his patrol car before driving off with him. Karen later told relatives that she was scared her daddy was going to put her in a hole, though Larry's lawyers argued that she was coached to say this by her mother. Even though Tommy's remains were never discovered, Larry Gibson was later found guilty of second-degree manslaughter for accidentally slaying his son. In the end, he only had to serve 12 months behind bars. He still vehemently denies any involvement in Tommy's demise, and, in his words, has dedicated his life to finding him since his release in 1996. Among the most widely known cases featured in Runaway Train was that of Polly Klaas, a 12-year-old who featured in a later incarnation of the video that's not available on YouTube. On October 1st, 1993, she was forcibly taken at knife point from her California home while having a slumber party with 2 of her friends. The intruder silently crept into their room, told the 3 of them not to make a sound, tied up both of Polly's friends, pulled pillowcases over their heads, and ordered them to count to 1,000, during which time he led Polly outside and forced her into his vehicle before disappearing into the night. During the search for Polly, actress Winona Ryder offered a $200,000 award for her safe return. That prize would go unclaimed. As it would turn out, after being driven away from the slumber party, Polly was strangled by the perpetrator, one Richard Allen Davis. Her remains were discovered 2 months later. During his trial, Davis insulted Polly's parents by flipping them off. The judge would later sentence him to death, a sentence which was given in 1996, and which has yet to be carried out. Following this heart-wrenching ordeal, Polly's father, Mark, established the Klaas Kids Foundation in 1994, which operates and supports a nationally registered search and rescue team that offers an array of services, including search managers, planners, field searchers, and canine units. Vicky Hamilton and Dina McNichol both featured in the UK version of Runaway Train. Vicky, a schoolgirl on her way home from visiting relatives, had last been seen at a bus stop in Falkirk, Scotland, on February 10th, 1991. As for Dina, she was last seen on August 5th of that same year. She and a male friend were hitchhiking their way home from a music festival in Liphook, England, and accepted a ride from a stranger. Her friend was dropped off near Reigate, while Dina stayed in the vehicle with the driver. That was the last time she was ever seen alive. Though initially thought to be unconnected, the two young women's bodies were discovered resting side by side in 2007, buried in the back garden of a Margate residence, one that belonged to serial slayer Peter Tobin. In September of 2006, Tobin had taken the life of a Polish university student named Angelika Clark. He had ended her life inside the Glasgow church where he worked and hid her body under the floorboards near the confessional. She was found 5 days later, when churchgoers noticed a foul smell emanating from the floor. Tobin was located and taken into custody shortly thereafter. His home in Margate was searched, leading to the unearthing of Vicky and Dina. It's even more unsettling when you consider that Tobin would have had to transport Vicky from Scotland all the way down to his home in Margate, a journey of more than 8 hours by car. Tobin was later convicted of all 3 slayings and given a whole life order. He passed away behind bars in October 2022, to the dismay of absolutely no one. Given that he took Vicky and Dina's lives in 1991, and Angelika's 15 years later in 2006, many suspect that he may have been responsible for other slayings committed during the interim. It's worth noting that he is a suspect in the disappearance of Louise Kay, another young woman who was featured in the Runaway Train video. Tobin owned a house in Brighton at around the time of her vanishing, close to where Louise was last seen, though the local authorities who currently own the home won't allow the police to excavate the garden. Curtis Hertzinger, 14, disappeared in 1990 after he was last seen walking home from his sister's house in Blue Lake, California. Shortly before he vanished, Curtis had told his mother that a family friend, a man named Stephen Daniel Hash, had acted inappropriately towards him. Initially, it was suspected that Curtis, who had encountered some difficulties at school and had a recent minor run-in with the law, was nothing more than a runaway, and the authorities assured the public that foul play wasn't suspected. Curtis's mother, however, never gave up trying to get the authorities to investigate his disappearance, and in 1993, 3 long years after he had gone missing, a task force was finally formed to look into the case, a force which was disbanded just 3 months later due to lack of evidence. In 1999, Stephen, the family friend, admitted to Curtis's mother that he had taken her son's life back in 1990. He even took her to the general location where he had hidden his remains, but the area was now so overgrown that she couldn't excavate it. When interviewed by detectives, however, Stephen denied having anything to do with Curtis's case. It would take another 5.5 years for a DA investigator named Wayne Cox to come across the case. He chose to investigate it during his free time, and was, eventually, able to extract a confession from Stephen. During the second round of questioning, Stephen admitted that he had crushed Curtis's head with a barbell. In 2008, he led detectives to where he had buried Curtis, in a shallow grave off Old State Road 299, between Blue Lake and Corbel. In Stephen's own words, he was able to negotiate a sweet deal for himself. He was sentenced to 11 years in 2009, and as of today, is a free man. It's believed the authorities rushed his case through to trial and allowed him to plead to the lesser charge of manslaughter in order to conclude the proceedings as quickly as possible. They didn't want to draw things out and attract attention. That way, people may not realize just how badly they had handled the investigation. Byron Eric Page disappeared on January 29th, 1992, while on his way to do some shopping in LA, California. his last known location was at a bus stop at the intersection of Overhill and Slauson Avenue. He had plans to visit a music warehouse and a video store located 20 miles away in West Hollywood. Unfortunately, Byron never returned home and has been missing ever since. Employees at both stores don't recall seeing Byron on that particular day, even though he was a familiar face to many of the staff. There was no indication that Byron wanted to disappear of his own free will. His clothes, savings, and treasured comic books were still in his bedroom at home. Byron himself wasn't known to run in bad circles and had no known enemies to speak of. He was a hard-working and intelligent young man. His PSAT results put him in the top 6% of the country, and he was preparing to begin college with aspirations of becoming a writer. He had a bright future ahead of him. And yet, he seemingly met with foul play. Byron was 5'8" and weighed about 160 pounds. At the time of his vanishing, he was wearing a blue and white jacket and a blue baseball cap. Elizabeth Wiles left her Lamar, Arkansas home at the age of 13, embarking on a journey with her boyfriend to California, where her family had previously resided. They spent 2 years in California before the Runaway Train music video caught their attention on MTV. After a week of contemplation, Elizabeth contacted her mother. "I talked to my mum, and we both started crying," Elizabeth happily recalled. "The video brought me home." In quite the opposite way, Michelle Ann Farley went missing in 1992. She was located shortly after Runaway Train released. In an interview, Soul Asylum's guitarist, Dan Murphy, said that Michelle had met with the band years later as an adult. During this encounter, she told the members of Soul Asylum, quote, "You ruined my life." That's because, after appearing in the video, she was forced to return to a bad home situation that she had been trying to escape from. Ivan Millett was an Australian serial slayer who claimed the lives of at least 7 people between the years of 1989 and 1992. His modus operandi was to target backpackers passing through Belanglo State Forest in New South Wales and conceal their remains in the foliage. Unfortunately, 3 of the youths featured in the Australian and German versions of Runaway Train would turn out to be among his victims. The German victim was a tourist named Gabor Neugebauer, who was slain alongside his girlfriend, Anya Habschied. As for the 2 Australian victims featured in the video, their parents have since asked that their images not be used by the media, so I'll not be revealing their names or faces here. The band's guitarist, Dave Murphy, once famously stated during an interview, "I met a fireman on the East Coast whose daughter was in the end of the video, and he'd been in a bitter custody battle with his wife over her. It turned out that the girl hadn't run away, but was killed and buried in her backyard by her mother." I've not been able to identify which person Murphy was referring to. If you know, please post their name down in the comments. On June 13th, 1980, Elizabeth Herford was seen for the last time at the Australian National University's bar in Canberra. She opted to hitchhike back home that night, and at some point between 9 and 9:45 PM, several witnesses reported seeing a young woman matching her description get inside a vehicle. Elizabeth never made it home that night, and she hasn't been seen or heard from since. "I need to have her body so that I can look ahead instead of looking back all the time," said Elizabeth's mother. "I have a very vivid imagination, and I'm a very emotional person. I watch the weather reports, and when it snows there, I imagine Lizzie out there somewhere with nothing to cover her. Or if it rains, I think Lizzie's getting wet. I think of her as just a skeleton now. It's horrible. It's almost impossible to describe." Ben Needham, a 21-month-old toddler from Sheffield in the UK, disappeared on July 24th, 1991, on the Greek island of Kos. He'd been left in the care of his grandparents whilst his mother went to work at a nearby hotel. Ben had been coming in and out of the family farmhouse when, at approximately 2:30 PM, his grandparents realised he was gone. Striking parallels have been drawn between his disappearance and the highly publicised vanishing of Madeleine McCann, both of whom remain unaccounted for to this day. In September of 2016, a significant development emerged when a resident of Kos disclosed to the authorities that Konstantinos Barkas, a now deceased heavy machinery operator, had confessed to killing Ben. Barkas allegedly revealed that he had accidentally run Ben over while operating heavy equipment at a construction site. He then hid the boy's remains amid the construction waste. In July 2017, a team excavated the site and found traces of blood on fragments of a sandal, as well as within a toy car. Both items were believed to have belonged to Ben. Although Ben has yet to be located, authorities are now confident that Barkas's confession was legitimate. Nicola Payne was a woman who went missing in Coventry, England. At the time of her disappearance, Nicola was en route to her parents' house. In 2016, Nigel Barwell and his brother-in-law, Thomas O'Reilly, were acquitted of her murder. On the afternoon of December 14th, 1991, the day Nicola went missing, a witness reported that she had observed Barwell's vehicle near a path leading to the River Sow, with Barwell and O'Reilly standing on either side of the vehicle's boot. Positioned between them was an object which appeared to be the sheet of a black tent filled with something heavy. It's believed it contained Nicola. 5 days after Nicola's disappearance, that tent was discovered in Barwell's garden. When the tent was re-examined in 2014, hair samples found on it were analysed. DNA linked these hairs to Nicola. However, the investigators lost crucial pieces of evidence, including Nicola's hairbrush, and they even mishandled the tent, storing it for years in an unsealed bag. It was, unfortunately, impossible to say that the evidence hadn't been cross-contaminated, and as such, it was inadmissible in court. Due to these forensic failures, Barwell and O'Reilly faced no consequences for their actions. Nicola's remains still haven't been located. Wilda May Benoit was last observed at her family's Creole, Louisiana residence on July 23, 1992. She was reclassed from a runaway to an endangered missing person in 2005. Little evidence exists about her case. Unfortunately, that seems to be a common thread throughout most cases in the runaway train files. So many of them have little to no information available online that I can't even tell you where or how they disappeared, let alone what became of them. Despite this lack of info, Tony Kaye, the director of the music video, has since stated that 26 of those featured have returned home since the video aired. In each of the unresolved cases, it's possible that the missing person has been found, only in the form of a John or Jane Doe. After all, some 4,400 unidentified bodies are recovered each year, and it's estimated that 40,000 bodies or partial human remains are still unidentified, and that's just in the US alone. We can only hope that none of these faces are among them, and that the runaway train youths that are still missing are alive and well somewhere, living their best lives. All we can say with certainty, however, is that the individuals highlighted in the runaway train video make up but a tiny fraction of all the missing person cases from that era. According to the NamUs database, over 600,000 individuals go missing annually in the USA alone. 40% of them are juveniles. Thankfully, the vast majority of these cases are resolved quickly, and fewer people are vanishing with each passing year. However, the eerie reality is that a substantial number remain forever lost. Their stories eternally unfinished. Their fates unknown. And all their loved ones can do is hope and wonder. A huge thank you to my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters: Matt Fennell, George Lopez, Holly Lyons, Alex Greensall, Asiamina, Azrael Warakai, Chief Cochuaque, Colin Monsma, Connor Louthan, Wewzow, Doopsy, Farewelltattoosjaxfl, Gina Valera, Hamish, Biluck, Infamous-senpapi, Monica Mendoza, Peter Lulgjuraj, TnSMOM, Hamish K, Alon Dolloff, Itai Alon, Nefus 1988, and Lydia Ciummo. Thank you so much for your continued support.